Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. And Sat means truth, Logos means study or science is a Latin word, and Sat we have to add additional T so that it rhymes in the Sanskrit as well as in English. Sattology, and that means a science of truth, study of truth. The antonym of that is mythology, which means a science of myth or study of myth. Myth in Sanskrit means a fake lie or imagination. Many Hindi words like mithya, mithyachar, mithyahankar, all these words come from myth dhatu. So the English etymologists combined a Sanskrit word meaning that with logos, created the word mythology, especially for the Vedic culture. Now, the Vedic culture is very scientific, very mathematical, and a lot of information points are given. Like, for example, to describe an event of a birth of Sri Ram or Krishna, they'll use the position of the stars. Important happenings like Mahabharata, Ramayana, they'll use the position of the stars when they started, when they ended. This is how they used to calculate the time during that period. And that is so historical that even today you can reproduce that exact date. And in the Vedic culture, Sankhya Yoga, which is also used extensively, Kapila Muni is the actual founder of Sankhya Yoga. Kapila Devahuti conversation you must read in Bhagavad Puran, very, very informative, where he gives instructions to his own mother on the science of self-realization. So without delay, we have a very special guest, very popular, and a very good researcher. I call him Rishi and Muni combined because he practices Swadhyaya, and Muni because he's a thinker and independent thinker and with valid modern techniques. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Nilesh Oak.
Namaskar, Aditya ji.
Namaskar, namaskar.
And you said some words, so I have few actually comments on that. Like while talking about Sattology as opposed to the mythology, you said mythology in the sense of false knowledge, but also mithya ahankar, you said. And when you said that, I thought of something. I mean, it just a anecdote came to my mind. Long time ago, of course, time of Gandhiji, but Gandhiji was not there. But in one of the Gandhi ashram, some of his some of the people working with him, they were sitting, and the subject came to subject of Bhagavad Gita. And the question was, everyone was asking around saying, which chapter you like the most out of the 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita? So everyone gave a different answer. Based on their liking and whatnot, which is great. Now, if you have heard the name, one of the Gandhian of that time, Mama Kalilkar, he was also a good writer, and in many ways did a lot of things. So when his turn came, he said he likes the what is that? Which one is Daivi and Asuri Pravritti? Is it the 14th chapter, or I forgot now, 16th chapter possibly,
17.
So he liked, or 113, I think 16. So he said he liked that 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which discusses this. And so not that people were startled, but they say, okay, and why do you like 16th chapter? And he said, in 16th chapter, there is a description of Asuras. Asuri Pravritti. Right. And then he said, we are all Asuras. so therefore, I like the chapter, of course, humorously. And of course, the opposite of that is a Daivi Prakriti. And so both are given. So I'm saying Sattology versus mythology. That's a nice description that you gave.
No, they so much of people do not spend their own time in research, and they immediately start believing. And it's very easy to believe the wrong propaganda than a good propaganda, because good propaganda requires some research.
Yeah,
you have to research it, good information. Like if everyone was honest, then they will go by what Valmiki and Vyasdev says. But when they're dishonest and they have to prove their superiority over Valmiki and Vyasdev, they're not fighting with you and me. They're fighting with Valmiki and Vyasdev, actually.
A very good point. They're fighting with Valmiki and Vyasdev. And even today's presentation that I'm going to share with you, in fact, I'll share a portion of it. But tomorrow, I'm giving this presentation, and more, what I'll share here. to Institute of Electrical Engineers, in India.
Mhm.
And just because you mentioned like people who will not follow the words of Vyasa and Valmiki, or have their ego comes in front of the truth. Okay, so
How is it
their
possible?
ego,
How is it possible? They ask this question.
yeah, but well, that's Asuri Pravritti, right? So
Shruti
this is
Smriti
also my,
Puranadi.
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I wrote an article on that. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatri ki Vidimvina
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Antiki Hare
Bhakti,
Utpata.
Utpata eva kalpate. So that Utpat recently happened. So just I'll tell you the fun story of it. So this my talk was organized and it was going to take place. I mean, it will take place tomorrow at this Electrical Engineers Association, this certain specific section in India. And when that came to the attention of one of these Utpata eva kalpate individual, he's actually writing in his mind critiquing my works, and I like that because that brings to people's attention. Okay, so they are going to read something and then they're going to say, who is this Nilesh Oak, if they already don't know about me, and that's going to take them to come to me. Also, when done in the right fashion, the critique is very important. I mean, we
Important.
vade jayate tattva bodha, right?
Right.
It is through the discussion, it is through the vada parampara, it is through the nyaya darshana or the darshana type of a vada, we make progress. But this individual, you'll love this individual. So, for example, the precession of the Earth's axis is a well-known astronomy phenomenon. Okay, and so what is precision of Earth axis? Because the essentially means the cardinal point. Let's say spring equinox. Okay, the cardinal point right now today it is in Uttara Bhadrapada. 2000 years ago it was at Ashwini. Now, if because the total cycle is 26,000 years, if you go back by 13,000 years, right? So from Uttara Bhadrapada, it is almost going to go to the other side, which is to say what? Around Uttara Falguni, somewhere there,
Correct.
like a 13 nakshatra. So now this spring equinox point is there. So right now, the spring begins in the lunar month of Falgun in our times.
Mhm.
If you go back, you know what's going to happen? Like those says 13,000 years approximately, the spring equinox, and therefore spring equinox will be in Uttara Falguni, and the lunar month of Bhadrapada will occur during the spring season. Now, this is something anyone who knows even the ABC of astronomy must know or must understand. I'll tell you this funny thing that this guy is writing, and he's writing those 10, 15 articles about my research, which I welcome, by the way. And I don't need to respond to them at all because my response is already there in the books that I wrote 10 years ago. But the funny thing is, this simple phenomenon is like, for a benefit of our audience, I'll say, what if you and me discuss on a call today, saying, okay, the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. And as in the northern hemisphere, as the summer progresses, the sun rises more and more towards the northeast. And as the winter progresses, the sun rises more and more towards the southeast. Now, this is a common sense. But what if somebody doesn't even understand that basic level of astronomy and starts calling this, let's say, Satsangi Oak hypothesis, that sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and during the summer it in the northern hemisphere rises in the northeast, and during the winter it rises in the southeast? What if they call it Satsangi Oak hypothesis? I mean, this is a common sense. That is exactly this individual has done. Do you know what this is calling? That precession of the Earth's axis, and therefore the change of a lunar month with respect to the season. He calls this Vartak Oak hypothesis. And he thinks I took it from Dr. Vartak. Now, of course, Dr. Vartak is my, inspiration. But I didn't have to even go to Dr. Vartak to get this. In fact, nobody needs to come to either Vartak or Oak to get this phenomenon. So these are Asuri pravrittis. I mean, sometimes they will not even understand what they are doing. But it's good. I mean, I give benefit of doubt to this person. He has a skin in the game. He's not hiding behind something. His name is direct there. He's a PhD in materials science, engineering, something like that. And he's out there. So I mean, actually, that's such a good manthan. It's a good for manthan. Okay. People should wake up and not just blindly trust just because somebody has some degree, PhD, therefore the person is intelligent. That's not the case. And he's proving it amply, with everything.
One of the faults of the Western education is increase in false ego or
Hmm.
mithya ahankar.
Hmm.
Because Newton, everybody saw the apple falling from the you know, it doesn't become Newton's law of gravitation; it's Earth's law of gravitation.
Yeah.
Because Gurutwakarshan is a very well-known fact. But people who have educated themselves in the Vedic traditional knowledge do not have that kind of problem. The reason is they always give credit to the previous acharya
Hmm.
and it goes on to Vyasdev because all the
Hmm.
knowledge is written by him, and that's what we are debating or talking about it to
Hmm.
discuss it. Now, the process of Vedic knowledge comes from Swadhyaya, very
Hmm.
important element.
Hmm.
If somebody doesn't have Swadhyaya in their life, they cannot understand Vedic knowledge. They may see mental speculation has a limit.
Yeah.
It depends on how crazy you are mentally, but it has a
Yeah.
limit. But
Yeah.
so the guided way of speculation is always better. Philosophical speculation. We are like when we read the Vyasdev's words and then see whether how true we can understand in today's context. That's a
Yeah.
very valid research,
Right.
and unfortunately, we have very few scholars in that category.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I'll get into my presentation. But
Yeah,
Aditya just the person that I mentioned, and all the fun and chaos he's doing. Actually, I admire what he's doing, not necessarily his intentions. Those intentions are very dull and dumb. What I admire is if anybody thought there is no humor in Indology research or Mahabharata dating research or Ramayana dating research, I'm saying, guys, you must not be reading the right stuff. Just go to his blog and start reading. Okay. All right. Okay. With that, I'm going to start sharing. So some aspects, and we will go. I mean, at some point you intervene, and we see how far we can go because I don't want to share the whole presentation. I mean, we will not able to. But something interesting, and again, we will take some very familiar instances. That's how I put the slide. So subject we can say is data science applicable to Indian epics, or uh, can the learnings or fundamentals of data science be applied to Indian epics, or why they should be applied? Because if they are not applied, then also people are led towards that mythology that you're talking about. It will not take them to the Sat, because to take it to the Sat, it's what is it? Mundaka Upanishad, Satyena labhyas tapasa yesha atma. You said abhyasa hona chahiye. Tapasya, Satyena labhyas tapasa yesha atma. To get to that truth, the Atma, you have to follow the path of a Satya, which requires tapasya, right? Satyena labhyas tapasa yesha atma. Samyak jnanena brahmacharyena nityam. So that brahmacharya is that hard work. But samyak jnana, which is like think of as a sanyam, which is what Bhagavad Gita is talking about, and that is also what combination of dhyana, dharana, and samadhi, which
correct,
is a very dedicated focus. Like Krishna says in a different context, eka bhaktir visheshate,
correct.
right? So very solid focus of dhyana, dharana, samadhi. Then only if you are lucky, and if there is a mercy of a Vyasadeva, if you are doing Mahabharata, if there is a mercy of a Valmiki, if you are doing Ramayana, then by their mercy, something will come out if you are putting all of this. So the principles, if you don't apply these scientific principles, which are darshana principles, it is going to lead to extremely wrong conclusions. And we will see some of this. In this module, again, we may or may not cover, we'll see. So let's look at the data science, and you mentioned it just at the beginning. So the data sankhya, right? Data science is in Rigveda, it's in the Mahabharata. For example, think of a Gruhatsmad. Gruhatsmad is giving the, what we used to Marathi we call pahade, or pade. Hindi
Correct.
they call pahade, which is multiplication tables. The whole multiplication tables, Gruhatsmad talks about it just as a sample in Rigveda. Or we will quickly look at the Nala and Rituparna Katha, just the aspect of a Katha, small portion of the Katha from Mahabharata. So data science in the Indian context is very ancient. In fact, I should mention some of the things that like multiplication table, but going beyond the understanding of statistics or the use of statistics in in finding a useful information. It may not be refined information, it may not be precise, but accurate enough to be useful. using statistics that you find in Rigveda, the allusions to it, because see, Rigveda is meant for many other things. So it is mentioned as a sidebar, but you can see those allusions in Rigveda. You can see that in the Mahabharata. And in the Western Europe, especially, because many other civilizations like Egypt and South America, they have destroyed the Spaniards or the whatever Romans and Greek. They destroyed these civilizations so much that we don't know what they had. They are destroyed beyond recognition. So we don't know. Fortunately, India survived, and to an extent, China survived, and so on. So in Western Europe, until like 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, possibly until like a 14th century, they absolutely had, I mean, there is no documented evidence for their knowledge of statistics. Again, I'm not saying this is a us versus them or anything. I'm just showing this as a reality, especially important for an Indian audience who is so wowed by what the West produced. Now, what West did in last 500 years in terms of science and technology is truly impressive. We are not denying that either. We shouldn't deny that. And now the word that you use, origin of data science, absolutely. I mean, it's in many other places. It came through the yajna, the creation of a yajna and the measurements that needed to be taken in creating a yajna, the whole trigonometry and sine and cosine, they came from that. And the other aspect we can refer here is a Sankhya, Nyaya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, and Purva and Uttara Mimamsa, all the Shad Darshanas. Like you mentioned Newton. And again, Adityaji, we should give credit to Newton where it belongs, especially the mathematical formulation that he did, granted by using the Indian mathematics, because until then they could not do it. In fact, all the three laws of Newton were already stated by Kepler,
Correct.
were already stated by Johannes Kepler, and of course Vaisheshika Siddhanta.
Correct.
They are then Vaisheshika Siddhanta. Now, Vaisheshika Siddhanta may or may not have a mathematical formulation. At least it is not there in the Vaisheshika Siddhanta, so we don't know. Kepler did not know it, although Kepler stated the three laws. Very, very fascinating. But Newton applied, Newton's introduced us to the mathematical formulation. We can give the credit for mathematical formulation. But the laws were already there. They were already stated by Kepler. It's a well-known thing. And they are already there in a very crisp and clear format in Vaisheshika. And that's a well-known knowledge. Knowledge is there. Many people don't know that. And so I will take one or two from each of these, not all of the six, to talk about the data science. Now, as an illustration, I'll take stepwise regression, and I'll show its origin even is there in the Purva Mimamsa. Okay, and we will apply it to Bhishma Nirvana in a very simple, not humorous, in a simple fashion that everyone can relate to. Also, insufficient data and premature analysis, how that leads to justification of false conclusion, the mythology that you are talking about, as opposed to Sattology. And why in a data science world, why the combining of scientific acumen, Tantra Yukti and Tarka Shastra is required if we have to truly get Sat out of the data, out of the information. So taking information, turning that to knowledge, and turning that knowledge into wisdom, something that is useful, we need a combination of all three. And briefly, I'll mention the excellent illustration of that is through that Arundhati Vasishta observation of Mahabharata. Everyone knows this, so I can go very fast through this. The time axis, today's 21st century, going back 10Ks, 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago. Mahabharata war in 5561 BC, 12,209 BC, Ramayana. Rigveda going back beyond 22,000 BCE. The European Enlightenment that I just referred to. See why this European Enlightenment came at a very certain specific time and came out of nowhere suddenly. That is when they came in contact with Eastern civilizations, even the American civilizations possibly. It's just that they burnt so much of the stuff from Mexico and South America and even North America that whatever the knowledge they had, they just destroyed the lives of the natives to such an extent that they went into survival mode, and therefore their knowledge may be lost. But knowledge did survive in Egypt to an extent, China, India, and a few other civilizations. And through that, European really benefited. Okay, and then this whole European Renaissance came. So that's that time there. We know the nonsense of AIT. And Aditya, the reason I'm showing this slide is it's very important to realize, even the individual that I just mentioned before we began, he cannot imagine anything happening like many other Indic researchers beyond 8000 BC. Okay, he cannot even possibly go beyond 5000 BC. I don't know what is exactly in his mind. I can't even understand what he writes. Whereas some other people find his writing to be extremely cogent, crisp, and clear. So I say, good luck to you. At least someone finds it useful. But the reason people cannot go, many of them cannot go beyond, say, 8000 BC, is because even when they understand the nonsense of Aryan invasion, they cannot pull themselves out. They need a red pill. They are still in a blue pill in terms of the time horizons that were artificially set by Aryan invasion, which were in turn based on this European dogmatic concept of the whole earth beginning, earth creation in 4000 BC or whatnot. That's why I'm just showing this line. We are going to go way back. Of course, we are not going to discuss the chronology today. Now, how old is data science? Well, I just gave an answer. You can see the allusions to it.
Just a minute. I'll add something on the red pill and the
Please.
blue pill. Because
Yeah.
most of the Indian viewers may not get the red pill and the blue pill. The red pill is the people who follow the truth, and the blue pill wait for social approval.
Yes.
In short.
And when people come to the truth, which is the red pill, and if they have lived in this, what you call the social blue pill is what? Social approval.
Social approval.
Yeah. If they are into that paradigm for a long time, actually, red pill truth unsettles them. They are not willing to accept it.
Correct.
Because they are used to because they feel like going back and saying, oh, what does the academic consensus says? What is the scholarly consensus? I mean, that's the language they use, right? And you'll find, I mean, I don't want to just hit on this individual that I mentioned, who is writing, but he will also use well, look, Nilesh is saying this translation, whereas look at all other translations, they are saying something else. And I mean, in my mind, I go like, so what? They are wrong. Okay. Or if you think that is right, why don't you take one of the translation that you think that is right and tell me based on that, what would be the timing of Mahabharata Ramayana? I think that's what he's critiquing right now. I think he's critiquing Ramayana. He cannot do that. So he's doing Vitanda. He doesn't have his own position. So Pratipaksha Sthapana, Vitanda. But so thank you. That's a good one. Red pill. So blue pill is like looking for social consensus, academic consensus, approval, scholarly approval, gurus, something, whatever it is. Now, Antiquity of data science, we gave that answer. It's an easy one, guys. It's there in Rigveda. It's there in the Mahabharata. It's there in the Ramayana. It's there in around the world. If you go, you will find references to that. But just as an illustration, I'm quoting something from Rigveda. This is for a simplicity, I'm going to call this a dice sukta. In Rigveda, 10.34. I don't know how many of you who are watching this knew this. There is a sukta that describes what you can possibly, how addictive is this dice game. I mean, the dyuta or gambling. And it also discusses all the bad effects of gambling, just like the Asuri Vritti is discussed in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Here it says, what are the different things? The person totally forgets. Person is, parts away with his wealth, but even with relative, he might put a wife, as one of the bet. And this is what is said in Rigveda. And Adityaji, you know very well, and many others who are watching who have read Mahabharata, they also know very well that what happened to Yudhishthira and so on. So the numbers are there, 3 pachasha. There are 53 53 specific moves or whatever you want to call it important in a game of Dyuta. Just like we have 52 cards in a pack of cards, or if people play Parchesi, that the number 20 is important, number 5 is important. So similarly, number 53 was important. And in very ancient times, they used to use the fruit, actually remove the fruit and take the seed of this Vibhitaka. which goes into Trifala churna, by the way, very medicinal. Okay. And I grew up eating these fruits, just the outside cover, and then you are left with the seed. And the seed was used to create dice like this in those times. Okay. So the whole game of gambling is connected with the Vibhitaka fruit, Vibhitaka tree. So origin of data science, statistics, and even heuristics. What is a heuristics again? A heuristics is not looking for a perfect answer, but heuristic is looking for an approximate answer that is useful enough to carry out the task. Okay, you can see the origins of it going back to Rigveda times, and we're talking of Rigveda times more than 22,000 BC, more than 24,000 years ago. But let's come to let's come to Mahabharata. Number of you would know the story of Nala and Damayanti, and if you don't know, do go to Google. Definitely go back to Mahabharata with translation. Most of you will need help of translation. That's perfectly fine. I always need a translation, although I can understand decent amount of meaning just from Sanskrit verses. This is Nala Damayanti. Okay, I'm not going to tell their story, but what is interesting is he is very interested in Damayanti. I'll not tell you the whole story. The story comes in the Mahabharata. But it so happens that Nala becomes the chariot driver of a king named Rutuparna. And they are going towards the Swayamvar of Damayanti. Okay. Actually, that long story. But they are going towards the Swayamvar of Damayanti, where Damayanti is going to choose the person of her choice as her husband. And so Rutuparna is the king. The circumstances have brought Nala to, although who himself is a king, by the way, of a Nishada kingdom, but has circumstances have brought him to become a chariot driver. Okay. And so when they are going from Rutuparna's place to Damayanti's place, on the way, there is a very interesting discussion. Rutuparna asked him how you became a good chariot driver, horse, rider. And Nala explains, in some ways, because Nala was a prince and a king, and so he had learned all of this. Now, what is interesting is on their way, they stop at a tree to take a rest, take a break. And this tree that I'm showing you the picture is a Vibhitaka tree, that Beheda or Bhela in Marathi, in at least the part where I grew up. That's the tree. What is interesting is while they're resting, King Rutuparna looks at the tree and he says, Nala, can you tell how many branches and how many leaves and how many fruits? And Nala said, oh my God, that will be tough unless I actually measure them. And Rutuparna says, well, not exactly. And he just makes an observation of what is fallen on the ground, as well as the good observation of the tree. He looks at the branches and the leaves and the fruits, and then he gives this description of that tree. Okay, how many leaves are there, how many branches are there, how many fruits are there, how many fruits have fallen on the ground, how many leaves have fallen on the ground. And I'm not to spend time on this. Then Nala says, well, how did you know this? Would you teach this to me? In return, I will teach you the science of horses, how to manage the horses. Now, understand, this is a story that occurred more than 7,500 years ago, because we are talking of Mahabharata itself in 5561 BC. This is the story before Mahabharata that has been told by some sage to Yudhishthira, because Yudhishthira has just lost in the gambling and has come to the forest, in the Vanavas. Now, so Rutuparna actually educates Nala in this.
Dhaume Rishi told this story.
Dhaume Rishi, thank you. Dhaume Rishi is telling to Yudhishthira, right?
Yudhishthira asked the question, is there any more unfortunate than me that despite owning everything, I lost everything?
Yeah, am I the first one, right? Am I the first one? He said, no. History repeats, he says.
If you don't learn lesson from it.
Correct. And we don't learn lesson. And until we learn lesson from it, it will repeat, unfortunately.
Correct.
And that is why we should study history. Those people who wonder why I should bother studying history. And so Rutuparna teaches him, actually, the long story, I'll cut this short here, but he goes, Nala goes, actually, there is no Swayamvar as a matter of fact, but he uses the knowledge of data science that he learns from Rituparna, uses it to beat his brother, or I forgot who it is. I mean, Aditya would know, and win the kingdom back. Okay, the Nishada kingdom. So this science goes that far back, and actually Nala is very surprised, and he says, "Well, that's how you do it." In another place, you get the description where how you would do it. He says, "Well, just count the total number of branches, and then count the number of leaves on few branches. So you get an average idea how many leaves on each branch times the branches. That's going to tell you a heuristic. I mean, heuristically useful number. Okay, using heuristics, so to say, a useful number." Anyways, let's move on. And as Aditya ji clearly said, that yes, all our darshanas and more, but darshanas are basically our science. I mean, not one science. There is a science. I mean, if you look at the yoga, that's a science of mind, science of psychology. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That's why we see that. Vaisheshika is the science of dealing. It's a physics. Okay, it's like dealing with material nature and bringing prosperity. Yato abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhi sadharma. That is what Vaisheshika will say. Vedanta is more of the matters that are paroksha, beyond this, something that we cannot objectively taste, such as the nature of Atma, like the way Bhagavad Gita says. Purva Mimamsa has to do with understanding the Vedas because they are so old, as I said, more than 24,000 years. Truly, we don't know how old they are. So when we try to understand something, we struggle. And Purva Mimamsa gives idea how to use certain rules to understand it. Nyaya gives you the method, the logic, and Sankhya that gives you how to classify things in nature and so on and so forth. So yes, this is giving the basis for the data, and that turns into the data, and of course, how to manage that particular data set. So yes, this is the basis of data science too. As an illustration, I'm going to take a couple of things, just this statistical regression, for example. Number of you would know it if you are in the university. In some form, you have done this. You have some kind of data. You plot it against the y-axis, one variable, on the x-axis, another variable. And in reality, you can plot multiple variables. Like after beyond 2 or 3 variables, it becomes very difficult to do the visualization. Nowadays, it's a lot of other techniques are there. But mathematically, you can handle it. And I'm not going to walk you through this, but this is for example, the process, how a regression is done, how a stepwise regression is done. Okay, how you may take a certain variable out, like some of the x, and see what is the effect of either removing that x variable, particular variable, or introducing it on your prediction on the output, and how that prediction matches with the reality. Okay. You can also do this not only to the variable, but you can also do this to a data point, a specific data point, like an outlier. Okay, you see, you just plot the data as what? Say run chart, a control chart, like histogram, a box plot, things like that. And that kind of tells you what might be, what might appear to be outlier. Now, if you want to see the effect of those outliers on your analysis, on the model that you're building, you can introduce the outlier one at a time and see what the effect is, take it out and see what is the effect. That's, in short, is a stepwise regression. What is interesting is in Purva Mimamsa, in understanding the meaning of a sentence, but also understanding the meaning of each word in a sentence, and also understanding the weight or the value of each word in that sentence. This is the sutra that is given in Purva Mimamsa. It says, Arthaikatvat ekam vakyam sakamsha ched vibhagesya. Simply translated in a simple fashion, it says, if you have a long sentence and you want to understand the meaning and also understand the value of each word in that sentence, what you do is first try to understand the meaning. There are different heuristics, again, simple methods to understand how to understand Sanskrit statements. Like I remember, I'm trying to think, it could be Professor Vienja or it could be Professor Gauri Mahulikar, or both of them or neither of them. But I remember possibly one of the two or both. They said, start, if you have a Sanskrit statement or like even Sanskrit shloka, start from the end, go backwards with the words and see what the meaning you find. And many times, I mean, it may not work all the time, but most of the time that method works. I found this very fascinating. Similarly, what this is saying is, if you have a long sentence and if you want to understand the meaning of it and you want to find out the relative value of each of the word used, what do? You take that one particular word and read the sentence without that word and see now what sense it makes, or does it make sense. Put that word back, remove another one, and see what happens. Put that back and take another word. This is, as a principle, as a method, as an intuition engine, very similar to the regression and stepwise regression and that kind of thing. Now, do understand that this statement came a very long time ago. As I said, the Vedas are very old, but even many, many thousand years ago, the meaning of the Vedas was kind of lost. People were finding it tough to understand. And therefore, the Purva Mimamsa, the science of Purva Mimamsa, came into the picture. Now, let's apply that to some data from the epics. Now, before even we apply, we have to find the data. I mean, that's true everywhere. Now, there are methods how we collect the data. Okay, there is a method to madness. For example, we cannot just pick randomly some data that we find and just start shouting, I got the data and let me test it and here is the conclusion. That will be extremely premature. So we have to define what is my objective, why I'm doing it, then the theory, because the theory decides what evidence is relevant. And like in case of Mahabharata, I'll give you an example. So my theory said all astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata text are actual, factual, visual observations, descriptions of a Mahabharata times, Mahabharata sky, And so now when I'm reading, anytime an astronomy description comes, I have to pull it. But remember, Mahabharata is vast. It's like a haystack. And so Mahabharata has 100,000 plus verses, okay, 125 plus. Out of that, when finally I extracted, I found like 300. I mean, 300 is huge. But when you look at 125,000, that's like very, very small number. So that's like looking for a needle in a haystack. In fact, Mahabharata is so attractive when you start reading, and that happened to me, Adityaji, many times. Like my goal is to extract the astronomy evidence, but as I start reading through it, I get pulled into the story, the katha, either the main katha or the upakhyan. And it is so fascinating. It's like, say, I never read this, or I don't remember. I need to know the details. And I will forget why I am reading Mahabharata, which is to say, extract the astronomy data. It is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So out of that, most of you have seen my talk, so you know the story. I extracted 300 plus. They all come in the form of a nimitta, which means sign, cause, apparent cause, etc. It does not. One of the translation of nimitta is omen. It doesn't mean only omen. Now, if somebody wants to take omen as a translation, it is their choice, and they are okay in terms of taking that as a omen. But what they have a responsibility is to define a theory. For example, their theory might say all the omens, meaning nimitta, all the nimitta observation, nimitta descriptions of Mahabharata can be used to come up with the dating of Mahabharata. That becomes their theory. And they have to use all the nimitta, not only astronomy, non-astronomy and astronomy, because they are focusing on a nimitta, omen, bad omen, rather than focusing on astronomy. And if they think they are capable, they can use it to show how they arrive at Mahabharata dating. They will not able to. They will just show how that is a wrong approach, but they don't do it. They just find faults with others, such as myself. The astronomy evidence comes in the form of nimitta, it comes in the form of upamana, it comes in the form of alankar. Now let's look at this. Number of you would have watched my Bhishma Nirvana episodes that we did on Sattology and other places. This one particular verse is, again, if you don't know how to collect the data, what is the rule for collecting the data? I mean, there are many rules, but two rules are most important. That you collect the data in a random fashion. What do we mean by random fashion? Random doesn't mean like randomly go somewhere and pick it up. That is what is done when we collect the physical data and in the lab and whatnot. In the case of Mahabharata, it would mean you are not selective in which data you collect. Once you decide your theory, you have an onus to collect every single data that is dictated by the theory. But what happens is, what if someone just pulls this statement? Now, this is in the context of Bhishma Nirvana. So they, and Adityaji, you are very well aware of this, because in fact, I will assert that with the exception of at least within the Mahabharata researcher community who have come up with the claims for the year of Mahabharata war, the only one person, that is me, I'm saying, no other Mahabharata researcher has ever come to the conclusion that there are more than 92 days between the 10th day of the war and the day of winter solstice. After I showed that there has to be more than 92 days, there are a couple of researchers who admitted that they were wrong in thinking 58 days. This is what this verse says, 58 days. But they did not acknowledge that that 92, more than 92, must fit between the 10th day of the war and winter solstice. So again, they have gone on the wrong track. But let's get back to this. So what if you pick some random data? Like this, and I'll tell you the translation of it. It says, this is Vyasa, this is Bhishmacharya saying, on the day of Bhishma Nirvana, the day, one day after the day of winter solstice, he's saying, Ashta Pancha Shatam Ratrya Shayanasyadyam Megata Shareshu Nishitagreshu Yatha Varsha Shatam Tatha. These past 58 days, okay, that I am on the Sharashaya, they felt to me like hundreds of years. Or the 58 days that have passed while I am on the bed of arrows, Sharashaya, they felt to me very painful in a way, tiring, more like hundreds of years. Now, the problem of only somebody taking selectively this shlok to begin with, not realizing the context, 100% of Mahabharata researchers minus one in our times are making this blunder. But this blunder, this mistake started 400 years ago with Nilakanta Chaturdhar. What must have happened is, while he's reading through it, he must have ran into this verse first, or even in his time, this verse must be the common understanding, as if like Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for 58 days. Now look what happened. We have gone through the 4 parts, so we don't need to spend much time. I have shown using 6 pieces of evidence from Mahabharata. And when people did not understand that and they objected in a very immature fashion, I have pulled additional evidence from the Mahabharata text to show how still this is true. So the evidence that was only 6 that is truly required became 23. Again, when they objected in an immature fashion, I had to pull additional evidence from Mahabharata to tell them why they are wrong. Now the evidence has gone to like a 60, and there is actually more, and it has gone to 90, close to 100. But we will look at just the 6th one. Again, I don't need to spend time. Bhishma fell in the battle I'll actually get to that on the next page. But what happened is this. Because Nilakanta Chaturdhar and 99.99% of the existing Mahabharata researchers are still stuck in these 58 days, guess what? This inference that Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for more than 92 days, it falsifies all known alternate proposals for the day of Bhishma Nirvana and for the year of Mahabharata war. Okay, and the enormous evidence corroborate this chronology is right here on this page. All the numbers that I'm showing you, anyone can note down those numbers. Anyone can go to Mahabharata and read those. But quickly, the 10th day of the, so I will explain that. So what happened? It's not that Nilakanta Chaturdhar 400 years ago. This is Adityaji same time as Raja Shivaji, yeah? 17th century we are talking. So he did come across some other additional references, again, not all of them. But when he saw that other reference, now after 10 days are gone, after one additional month is gone on the bank of Ganga, additional days are gone, after that addition to that 30 days, now they go to see Bhishma, and Krishna tells Bhishma that now you have additional 56 days to live. Panchashatam Shatcha Kurupravira Shesham Dinanam. The remaining days are 56. Okay, so 9 plus that 27 or 36 plus X plus Y plus 56, that takes you to 92 or 95 plus. But because Nilakanta Chaturdhar possibly saw this 58 number first, he has gone in twisting and turning and modifying all these other verses, their translation. For example, the Panchashatam, okay, 56. Do you know what he does, Adityaji, to this? He takes it as Pancha and Shata. So he says 5 times 6 is 30. He says this verse is not saying 56. This verse is saying 30. And many great Sanskritists have said that that is not acceptable at all. Okay. Anyways, so he's tried to justify, even take this number, try to convert it to match his total 58. This thing doesn't work. Sanskrit is a close to perfect language, if not the perfect language. Let me take those instances and show you here. Okay, this is just a fun thing we are going to do, similar to that regression thing. Okay, or think of that sentence. We are looking at this one long sentence, and how do we measure the value of any of this particular evidence piece? So Bhishma fell in the battle on the 10th day of the war. I can go back. Then the war continued for 18 days. Then Bhima and Arjun humbled Ashwatthama after the 18th day. Then Pandavas performed the Preta Kriya. We don't know how long this time was. Could be 1-2 days, maybe 3 days. I'm calling it Y. Okay, just let it be Y. Then Pandavas they went to the bank of Ganga, spent a month. Now, how long is a month? I'm taking the conservative time to be 27, but it can be as far as 30 days. 29.53 days, the lunar month, for example, okay, or solar month, 30 days, or 31 days, 32 days, something like that. I'm taking the smallest number deliberately to give a benefit of doubt to this entire 99.99% Mahabharata researcher crowd of 58 days. Pandavas spent a month on the bank of Ganga. They returned to Hastinapur. Then Rajyabhishek, the coronation of Yudhishthir, took place. Yudhishthir did some administrative tasks. We don't know exactly how long this time was, but definitely it was more than a day. But ideally, if as a most conservative scenario, you can put x equal to 0 and y equal to 0. In fact, you cannot. I mean, y has to be 1 or 2. X has to be at least 1. But I'm just saying, if you want to, you can do that. And still, the Mahabharata evidence is so clear and crisp that it will take you to more than 92 or 95 days for Bhishma from the 10th day of the war to the day of winter solstice. This is all the Pandavas and Krishna met Bhishma, and this is the day Krishna told Bhishma that he has still 56 more days left to live. Shesham dinanam and pachashatam shatchakuru pravira. Okay. Then what happens? Bhishma Yudhishthir do the discussion for 6 days. We have the wonderful descriptions of that in the Mahabharata text. On the 6th day, Bhishma recites the Vishnu Sahasranam. On the same day before Bhishma does that, Krishna recites the Shiva Sahasranam. Then Yudhishthir returned to Hastinapur. Vyasa actually told Bhishma to let Yudhishthir go back. And Bhishma tells Yudhishthir to go back and not return until the day of winter solstice. Yudhishthir goes back. Mahabharata text tells us he lived there for 50 nights and then returned to Bhishma just the day after the winter solstice, because winter solstice is the day it's truly to the sun is to the extreme south, and from the next day it's now in Uttarayan. Okay, and Bhishma was waiting for that Uttarayan. Now this number 11 is that one reference that I'm referring to, that Nilakanta Chaturdhar thought is the right duration. And since then, not many Mahabharata researchers have bothered to read Mahabharata, so they're just blindly, very dogmatically sticking to that number even to this day. Even after reading my book, they don't want to change. So Adityaji, when you said, in that case, they are not fighting with me.
Absolutely.
They are fighting with Vyasadeva. They are fighting with the Mahabharata evidence. Okay. So and Bhishma says that 58 minutes. Go ahead.
They're also fighting their own intellectual capacity also.
They are either fighting or they are exhibiting their intellectual capacity. Right? Both of those. So that is this particular verse. And then Bhishma passed away on that day. We can call this winter solstice day +1, because it has to be truly starting in Uttarayan. So that's +1 day that satisfies that condition. Okay, and that's what Bhishma is waiting for. So if we do this, which I showed you on the previous one, the 9 days from 10, 11, 12, you can count to 18. Those are 9 nights or 9 days. Then Y, the middle days that you can look at the screen here. Then the month long on the bank of Ganga, I'm saying conservative could be 27. The other number could be 30, 31, 32. The solar month can be 32 days long. Okay, we don't know what was the situation that time. Then we can calculate, by the way, but I'm saying we are taking the shortest possible number to give a benefit of doubt to the other party. Then the number of days, X days, is when they came back to Hastinapur and they went to meet Bhishma. Then Krishna says 56 more days. And that gives you X plus Y plus 92 to 95 days, depending on how long you assume the month. Now let's do this stepwise regression. Suppose if I remove this particular reference, now I'm not asking you to remove it. We should not remove any reference. We have a truth likeness score, verisimilitude score, to take care of some observation if it doesn't match for your claim. So we don't throw those observations, just like we do not throw outliers in data science. When we're doing analysis, we may remove the outliers from the analysis, but we don't throw that outlier, because outlier is going to teach you a lot. No, so but suppose we remove it from the analysis. That's what I'm saying, that 58 days. What is the effect? I mean, can we still calculate the duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows? Absolutely, we do. In fact, we do not need that 58-day reference to calculate how long Bhishma was on the bed of arrows. This is the answer, X plus Y plus 92 to 95 days. Definitely more than 92 or 95 days. Now, let's say we put this back again and we remove something else. So we remove Y. What's the difference? No difference. Still, so Y is equal to 0, let's say, it's gone. Still more than 92 days. If we remove X, X is 0, still more than 92 days. If we remove those 6-day discussion of Bhishma and Yudhishthir, same. Because we started with 9 plus 2730 plus Y plus X plus 56, we get 92. What if we remove the 50 nights that Yudhishthir spent in Hastinapur? No issue. We still have 9 days plus Y plus X plus 2730 plus 56, right? What if we remove the 56-day reference? Now, all others will be in, but we remove 56-day reference. No problem. We have 9, okay? We have 9, we have X, we have Y, we have 2730, plus we have 6, plus we have 50. This number 9 and plus number 7. We still have those. That takes us to 90 to 95 or more days. Now, interesting one. What if we remove the reference number 4? That is, we still have a lot of descriptions in Mahabharata that will say that they were on the bank of Ganga, they went to bank of Ganga, they were there for some time, and then they came back. So we don't know what it is. But we will not, let's say, therefore, if we remove that reference, we will not have an exact number like 27 or 30. We will not know that Masam Ekam Bahipura, that they spent month long outside. In that case, the formula will slightly modify. Okay, so here is our formula. But now, let's say we remove that 2730. What answer we get? Surprise, surprise. Actually, we get the answer X is still there, Y is still there, 9 is still there, 56 is still there. So X plus Y plus 65, 56 plus 9. And I added one term called Z. Now, why did I add this term? Now, I don't know exactly how long Pandavas spent time on the bank of Ganga. So that one reference is removed from analysis. But still, there are huge descriptions, like 40 chapters of Shanti Parva and few chapters of Stri Parva that tells us that they went to the bank of Ganga, how they did the Jala Kriya and many other Kriya for all the warriors that were fallen, including Karna and Abhimanyu, and of course, of both sides, like, even for Duryodhana and whatnot. And then there was a long discussion between Narad Muni, Vyasadev, and everyone, pacifying Yudhishthira. So we don't know exact time, but still there was some significant time. For that, I'm calling it Z. The point is, even when we remove that reference, and many of the 99.99% of the Mahabharata researchers, existing researchers, do not dare discuss that reference, which is right at the beginning of a Shanti Parva, Masam Ekam Bahipurat. Okay? Because why? Instantaneously, it destroys their claim. Same thing for 56 days. Now, Adityaji, you'll be surprised to know, now that they are realizing, because common people are asking them the question, hey, why did you not take this 56 into account? Why did you not take this Masam Ekam Bahipurat? So they are like slowly, taking one reference here and there to like satisfy the audience, saying, hey, you know what, I took that into account, and so on and so forth. My point is, even when we remove that Masam Ekam Bahipurat, we should not remove it. There is no reason to remove it. In fact, it will be breaking the principles of data science, common sense, scientific acumen, logical reasoning, and all that. But even for as a experiment, stepwise regression, to see the value of that reference. Even when we remove that, still the number we are left with is more than 65. 65 plus x plus y plus z. It will never approach the 58 days that 99.9999% of Mahabharata researchers are claiming. That's the beauty of using the principles of data science. Okay, quickly use one more and we'll stop. Which is at some point, Aditya, we have to do a long series on this, the Arundhati Vasishtha. But time and again, I do bring it, just a 2-minute highlight. And this is such a powerful reference. I mean, people, every Mahabharata researcher, they get nightmares during the daytime as soon as they hear Arundhati Vasishtha. That's the power of Vyasa's words. Okay, so astronomy references 300 plus. Again, we know this sign. We know how to separate them into, classify them, so that the references in the blue we should test first, because they tell you where to search for the year of Mahabharata war. And the references in the orange actually help us find that specific year, the specific day for Krishna living on peace mission, the first day of the war, the last day of the war, the day of Bhishma Nirvana, which specific day Abhimanyu was killed, which specific day Karna was killed, what was the tithi, what was the lunar month, what was the season. So everything in the orange help you pinpoint that. But the one in the blue is what allows you to exactly say where to even search for. I mean, if you lost your cell phone, you just don't go to somebody else's house and try looking for it unless you have visited that person. You say, it must be in my house, maybe in my office. Let me give a ring and see. Something like this. The blue one gives you approximate. We have done this before. Now, data science. What is data science? What are the key elements of data science? That can be done in 10 different ways. I'm just going to show you a couple here. So data science in the center, like domain expertise is required, statistical machine learning is required, engineering knowledge is required, analytical applications, algorithm, ability to program, all that is required. Now, in our context, I'll say we need the Tarka Shastra, we need the Tantra Yukti, we need the Vijnana Buddhi, and ability to extract the data, classify the data. That's what I showed you just now. Design thinking, okay, and how to draw logical inferences and not create fallacies, futilities, okay. Just give some, useless inference just to irritate somebody else, okay, although it doesn't follow the principles of logic. We shouldn't be doing that. And one of the things that I mentioned, design thinking, is very much required for Indology research. It is required everywhere, no matter what you do. Even cooking a wonderful dish or something, you need design thinking in refining it. How is that design thinking works? Purva Paksha of existing theories. That's what Aditya and I'm doing for a long time. Then you find a problem that is not solved by existing theories. Then you propose a theory whose prediction includes solution to that unsolved problem. Okay, that is how it works every single time. This does not change. Then you think of thought and empirical experiments. Then you say, how can I perform it? You actually may able to perform, you may not able to perform. If you are able to perform, you see, can I validate what I have claimed? Validation leads to explanation and constraints. And if that doesn't work, you go back to the previous steps. Think of a different experiment to try, different thought experiment to try. Or sometimes that's not enough. You might have to come back and propose a new theory, modify your theory, and so on. That's the process of science. That is also the process of darshana. Darshana never claims that your knowledge is absolutely certain. In fact, Nyaya Darshana says no knowledge can be taken on the face value. Okay, no knowledge is intrinsically valid until you validate. Just like that Rutuparna and Nala story. By the way, in that story, what happens is Rutuparna says there is no need to measure, just trust me. Nala says no, but until I measure, how would I know that you are right? And finally, Rutuparna yields, and Nala, actually, the story goes that Nala cuts the branches, cuts the trees, cuts that particular tree, and actually counts the branches, counts the leaves, counts the fruits, and that number, heuristically speaking, I presume, this is my assumption, agrees with what Rutuparna has predicted. Now, that story has a lot of important message. One is that the power of a prediction, using the data science to make a wonderful prediction, which is what Rutuparna did. But until we objectively test it, until we validate it, we would never know whether Rutuparna was right or not. Same thing with our assumptions, our theories, and whatnot. So in this particular case, a lot of work, guys. But what Rutuparna did is, sorry, what Nala did is actually cut the tree and actually counted the branches and the leaves and the fruits. Okay, this is metaphorical story in some ways. I mean, it might have happened in reality. My point is the lesson, because that's what the Itihas is about. Dharmartha kama mokshanam upadesham. Okay, it is meant for upadesham. Puravrittam kathayuktam itihasam prachakshate. So we are going to learn a lot of things. We will learn if we know how to learn. And so validation is also equally important. So that's what it's been shown into the design thinking, that you may again go up, but come back until you validate. One last point, or two more points. When you do this validation or objective testing, many people, many Mahabharata researchers, majority of Mahabharata researchers, just as a jugad, the Hindi word jugad, they will just give some kind of explanation and they think they have done their job. I mean, it's childish to say the least. Just when you test a specific observation in an objective fashion, many times they don't even test in an objective fashion, but let's assume they tested in an objective fashion. They will give explanation. Chalo bhai, ye ho gaya. I mean, now I have explained it, but that's not enough. Because if you are doing an objective testing in the context of a specific problem you are going to solve, you are trying to solve, then it should also lead to a constraint. Also lead to a constraint every single time. That is the beauty of data science. That is the beauty of mathematics. That is the beauty of a scientific method. That is the beauty of Darshana Shastra. Okay, the idea is to get to the answer. And if you doubt that answer, you can do further studies. No one is asking you to take that as the final answer, but it is a better answer than all previous answers. We know if you're facing the north direction, this is how the stars will make their tracks through the night, 24 hours, making a complete circle. With the photography, you can see that the center point is that North Pole point or Polaris in our times. This is the verse that appears in the Bhishma Parva, just day before the Mahabharata war. There where Vyasa is saying was Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. Ya chaisha vishwata rajastre loke sadhu sammata Arundhati taya pesha Vasishta prashtata kruta. In our times, if we see Vasishta is ahead of Arundhati, you must understand the motion is anti-clockwise, that is going from right to the left. So Vasishta is ahead of Arundhati. Okay. This is the situation in our times. This is the situation we will find in the sky, whether you do mathematical calculations, whether you do astronomy simulation calculation, it doesn't matter. If you are going to use the correct astronomy, it will show you that Vasishta was walking ahead of Arundhati as seen from the Earth, naturally due to the apparent motion of the Earth itself, because they are not moving. It's the Earth that completes one rotation in 24 hours. Vasishta would be seen walking ahead of Arundhati in our times. That's the same situation 1,000 years ago, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Whereas Vyasa is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, it was the Arundhati that was walking ahead of Vasishta, as if they had exchanged their positions, who is ahead, who is behind. And so that also tells you, see that I told you, you have to explain, but you have to also show the constraint. The constraint is Mahabharata war did not happen in last 6,500 years. So when did it happen? Well, these are the constraints. It says in 11,091 BCE, that's when they were together. They were they're walking together, no one ahead, no one behind. Same thing in 4508 BCE. So the Mahabharata date has to be between these two dates. Again, the testing is giving you an inference, okay, that also gives you explanation why they're walking together, why Vasishta was walking ahead in our times, and now when the Arundhati might be seen walking ahead of Vasishta. Guess what? Between these 11,091 to 45 BC, you are always going to see Vasishta, Arundhati walk ahead of Vasishta. And using additional evidence, the year comes to 5561 BC. Okay. You have seen this before. I'll go fast through this. And the last point on the data science is the sequence in which you test the data matters. Now, when you test it, you will not know it. That's understandable because you don't know what that particular testing is going to produce. But once you test each and every observation, each and every evidence, sometime individually, sometime grouping together, sometime in association with some other piece of evidence, and I have shown examples of that before to you through Arundhati, but Bhishma Nirvana and many others, then at least to explain it to other people, you have to put in a sequence like this. So my x-axis is a problem solving from approximately right to going to precisely accurate. My y-axis is the sequence in which I tested my evidence. Now, I may not have tested the evidence in that fashion, but when I want to explain it, it's called Swartha Anuman. Like, to understand myself, I might have done it in a random fashion because I didn't know what it will give me. I'm the original researcher. I don't know. But now that I'm explaining it to others, I should do my best to explain in such a format that they understand the scientific acumen. They understand the logical reasoning behind it. Okay, why it is explained. So the first one, for example, Arundhati Vasishta gives you this boundary line that I just showed you. Then Bhishma Nirvana, I have explained before, that gives you that 7000 to 4700 BC. Or if you just add some additional error, just say, be my guest, that's 8000 to 3700 BC. Epoch of Mahabharata war takes you another date. Then you look at planetary observation 35 plus. Then you look at phases, position of the moon, eclipses, seasons, tithi, chronology, narrations, on and on. It will always take you to 5561 BC and no other date. And then, of course, they're not done. I mean, data, right, guys? If a data exists in some field and in some fashion, it can be connected logically, scientifically with the descriptions of the text, like say in this case, Mahabharata or Ramayana, Rigveda, or whatever you are doing, then you should test it. Data is amazing thing. Okay, and that's what it shows. If the data exists in different disciplines of science and they can be connected to Mahabharata text, Mahabharata description, it all leads to 5561 BC. It corroborates. Some of the data will not lead you to 5561 BC, meaning from that data you cannot predict 5561 BC. Only astronomy can do that. But the evidence will corroborate that date. Okay, it will say, yeah, it must have happened between 4000 BC and 6000 BC, and 5561 falls between that. So, last line, Adityaji. Bhartuhari says this: Pradnya vivekam labhate bhinna agama darshani. Multidisciplinary knowledge is required. Okay, so even for data science, just like knowing how the statistics works is not sufficient. That's why if you saw that one chart, the subject matter expertise was mentioned. Now, subject matter expertise in case of Mahabharata Ramayana is not just Sanskrit knowledge alone. If you're testing astronomy data, you need to know Sanskrit or get help, the right help. But you also should have astronomy knowledge in significant depth. If you are studying oceanography evidence from the Mahabharata, you should have oceanography knowledge. If you are looking at genetics evidence from Mahabharata, you need genetics knowledge. If you are looking at archaeology evidence from Mahabharata, you need archaeology knowledge. If you don't have that, anytime you find a sword or anytime you find a chariot, in a very foolish fashion, when you will start shouting Mahabharat war happened there. That's why I mean by the Agama Darshane, the very solid background knowledge. Pradnya, you need a Pradnya. The spark will do, and a lot more is also good. Pradnya Vivekam Labhate, Viveka, not just jumping to the conclusion. Pradnya Vivekam Labhate, Bhinnai Agama Darshane, Kriyadva Shakyam Unaitum, Swatarkam Anadhavata. He says, where is the need for Adityaji, you will love this, the last line. Where is the need for mental speculation? When Vyasa and Valmiki have given us such rich evidence, and so is Rigveda, the Rigveda Rishis, and everything else, the rest of the ancient Indian narratives. Why? I mean, use your knowledge, use your scientific acumen, use your logical reasoning, use your pradnya, use your vivek, common sense, the desire for knowing the truth, as opposed to jalpa, just to win for the heck of it, as opposed to just creating chaos, so that instead of we having a clear and clean and crisp history of our civilization, deliberately create chaos. There are many researchers who are busy deliberately creating chaos. And that can be seen if we apply the principles of scientific acumen, data science, logical reasoning, Vyapti to their research. So with this, I'm going to stop. Adityaji.
Oh, one of the problems is according to scholars. Now, when they say according to scholars, immediately everything gets brushed under the carpet. Now, who is a scholar, who is not a scholar? Now, now in our process, I'm talking about the Vedic Gurukul system. Every disciple is supposed to independently, scrutinizingly study and come to their own conclusion. That's the process.
Yes.
And during that process, they automatically become the subject matter expert or a scholar. Now, but if you start with a faulty logic and ignore the previous gurus, previous writings, everything, then you are starting on a blank slate. So better say according to me,
Yeah.
not
Correct.
according to the parampara or anything. And
Yeah.
then the history was already recorded by somebody else. We are trying to understand it, what period it happened. Incidents did happen, and when you ignore the material proofs or evidences given, then automatically you're going to reach to a wrong conclusion for
Right.
anything. It is good.
Right. I'll make quick 2 points. So when you said scholars, I'll say, well, it's important to recognize that there are good scholars and bad scholars. There are good academics and bad academics, right? So when we talk of Devi Pravrutti and Asuri Pravrutti, they are still human beings we are talking, but somebody have a more balance of Devi Pravrutti. And the second point you said, very important, you said you just don't start from the scratch and say, hey, I'm starting here. Look at what other people have done. In fact, one of the example was, and nothing wrong in critiquing them, because
Correct.
vade jayate tattva bodho. Like
Correct.
you see the
That's
new
right.
acharya comes and improvises. I mean, you
Correct.
see it in every tradition. You see in the Gaudiya tradition,
Right.
you see in the Maharashtra tradition. For example, if you read Eknath and Jnaneshwar, Eknath Maharaj is considering Jnaneshwar as his guru. But Eknath Maharaj have disagreed with Jnaneshwar at certain points and given a more improvised meaning of it.
Correct.
Okay, because that happens with the time. Vade jayate tattva bodha. So the point is, like today I discussed the Nilakanta Chaturda. What these people have done is they took our current researchers, they took Nilakanta Chaturda's conclusion, but never bothering what motivated him to go there.
Correct. Purpose.
Purpose.
When the purpose is lost, everything is lost, because
Right.
you can do anything. Thank you so much for such a wonderful and detailed. I could not even move. It was so
Thank you.
intriguing, and so many proofs are there in different aspects, and a very strong logic of Arundhati Vashishta also, because which is those stars do not just randomly roam in the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is no race car competition that can go, but they go do that at a particular interval. So thank you so much, Direshji, and thank you for all the viewers for joining and staying such a long presentation, all of us. And I think I did not see anyone drop out. So do watch it on YouTube if you want to reference it anytime in future, and do comment over there. Namaskar and thank you.
Namaskar. Thank you.